You know, son, when I look back now at 65 sitting here with a warm cup of coffee in my hand, it almost feels like a movie. People see Starbucks today and think it was always this giant, this unstoppable brand. They see the green logo on every corner in America, in airports, in malls, overseas, in countries we couldn't even point out on a map years ago. But the truth is Starbucks almost failed. And I was right there in the middle of it, living through every damn moment. Let me take you back. This was the late 1970s, and I was a young man in Seattle just trying to make something of myself. My name's Richard, by the way. Richard Miller. Folks around me always thought I was crazy for getting involved in the coffee business. You have to understand back then, coffee wasn't what it is today. It wasn't some lifestyle, some culture, or a community. It was just coffee. Something people made in the morning at home, cheap. Maybe picked up a cup at a diner if you were running late. Nobody in America thought people would pay a premium price for a cup of it. But I had this buddy, Gordon, and through him, I met three guys: Jerry Baldwin, Zev Siegel, and Gordon Boker. Those were the men who first dreamed up what became Starbucks. Not the Starbucks you know today. Their idea was simple at the start. They wanted to sell high-quality coffee beans, teas, and equipment. Not lattes, not cappuccinos, not even brewed cups of coffee to go. Just beans and machines. That's it. Now here's the part most people don't know. Those early years, they were tough. Brutal, really. We weren't making big sales. We weren't attracting big investors. And every month, it felt like we were hanging on by a thread. There were nights I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering if we'd make it another week. I had a wife, 2 little kids at home, and bills stacking up on the counter. And here I was, betting everything on a little shop that smelled of roasted beans, but didn't pull in enough customers to pay the rent. You see, most Americans didn't understand the concept of specialty coffee. We were trying to sell an experience people didn't know they wanted yet. Imagine walking into a store in 1978 and someone telling you, "Hey, this bag of beans is going to cost you 5 times what you'd pay at the grocery store." People thought we were out of our minds. But then came the turning point, maybe I should say. The man who was the turning point? His name was Howard Schultz. He wasn't some hotshot back then. Just a young marketing guy from New York who came to Seattle, curious about what we were doing. Howard walked into the Pike Place store, smelled the beans, felt the vibe, and he was hooked. He kept saying he saw something bigger, something beyond just selling beans. He said, "You're not just selling coffee, you're selling community, gathering place." I'll admit at the time I thought he was just another dreamer talking to big. But there was something in his eyes, some fire, like he believed it with his whole soul. Howard kept pushing us to expand, to think differently. At first, the founders resisted. They didn't want to serve brewed coffee. They thought that would cheapen the business. But Howard, he had gone to Italy. And when he came back, he couldn't stop talking about the espresso bars there. The way people gathered, laughed, connected over coffee. He wanted to bring that culture here to the States. I remember the night he first pitched it to me. We were sitting in a small diner off First Avenue, the kind of place with sticky menus and bottomless cups of watery coffee. He leaned across the table, eyes burning, and said, "Richard, people don't just need coffee. They need a place. A third place, between work and home, where they belong. Starbucks could be that." I'll be honest, I laughed. I told him Americans weren't going to pay $2 for a cup of coffee. Nobody would pay that kind of money when you could brew a whole pot at home for pennies. But Howard just smiled, almost like he knew something I'd in single quotes. Well, life has a funny way of humbling you. When Starbucks finally took the leap and started serving brewed coffee, cappuccinos, lattes, well, let's just say people noticed. Slowly at first, a young professional here, a curious student there, but then word spread. Folks started lining up. Suddenly, we weren't just selling beans anymore. We were selling an experience. But don't let me romanticize it too much. Those early expansion years were hell. Money was always short. Investors were skeptical. Every time we opened a new store, it felt like we were gambling our last dollar. And trust me, there were nights we thought we'd lose it all. I can still feel that knot in my stomach when payroll was due and the bank account was almost empty. One night, I came home late, exhausted. My wife looked at me and said, "Richard, maybe it's time to quit. The kids need stability. We need security." I didn't even know what to say. She wasn't wrong. I had put everything on the line for a dream that, at that moment, looked like it was falling apart. I went to bed that night wondering if tomorrow I'd have to walk away. But here's the thing, you. Don't build something great by quitting when it gets hard. Howard didn't quit. He pushed harder. And when he finally took over Starbucks, he fought like hell to make that dream real. He raised money, convinced investors, and kept hammering away at this vision of a coffee house culture in America. I stood by and watched as one store became 10, then 50, then 100. I remember flying out to Chicago for the opening of a new store. Standing in line with customers who were buzzing with excitement, that was when it hit me. We weren't selling coffee anymore. We were selling belonging, and people were hungry for it. Looking back, Chapter 1 of Starbucks' story was all about survival. We were nobodies, pushing an idea that seemed insane at the time. And yet, against all odds, it stuck. We didn't know it then, but those sleepless nights, those empty bank accounts, those moments of doubt, they were the foundation of something that would one day become a global empire. And me. I was just a small part of it, but I can tell you this. Success doesn't come wrapped in pretty paper. It comes through fire, through doubt, through almost failing before you figure it out. So when you see that green mermaid logo on every corner today, remember, it almost never happened. Asterisk, you know. When people see the scale of Starbucks today, they think it was a straight climb to the top. As if one day we were struggling and the next, we had stores popping up across the world like wildfire. But let me tell you something. It was never that simple. Success never is. By the time Howard Schultz took the reins, Starbucks had momentum. Yes. But momentum doesn't guarantee survival. Expansion is a beast of its own. When you're small, the fight is about staying alive day to day. When you grow, the fight changes it, becomes about staying true to your vision while the world keeps pulling you in different directions. I watched Howard wrestle with this. The man had relentless energy. He believed Starbucks could be everywhere, every neighborhood, every airport, every city across the globe. But with that belief came massive risk. Expansion costs money, and money was always tight. We were knocking on investors' doors constantly, pitching this vision of a coffee culture America hadn't fully embraced yet. Some laughed us out of the room. Others shook their heads, saying coffee wasn't scalable. But every once in a while, someone would lean forward, catch Howard's fire, and say, "All right, I'm in." I'll never forget the day we opened our first store in Chicago. It was 1987. It felt like sending your kid off to college. You pray it survives out there in the real world. Seattle was our home turf. People kind of understood us there. But Chicago? That was a whole different animal. It was cold, competitive, unforgiving. I stood outside that store on opening day, heart pounding, wondering if anyone would even walk in. And then they did. Slowly, one by one, people came. Some just out of curiosity. Others because they'd heard whispers about this Seattle coffee thing. I stood behind the counter that day, watching customers take their first sip, seeing their eyes widen like they'd tasted something completely new. That's when I knew we were onto something. But expansion wasn't just about opening new stores. It was about culture. Howard used to say, "If we lose our soul, we lose everything." And he meant it. Starbucks wasn't supposed to be just about selling drinks. It was about creating a third place, that space between home and work where people could relax, connect, belong. The challenge was, how do you keep that soul alive when you're opening hundreds of stores? Thousands? Asterisk, we faced critics everywhere. Some said we were growing too fast, that quality would suffer. Others claimed nobody outside the US would buy into our vision. Coffee in Italy was different. Coffee in Japan was different. Who did we think we were? Trying to take an Americanized version of espresso culture to places that had been doing it for centuries? And you know what? The critics weren't always wrong. We stumbled plenty. There were stores that failed. There were markets we didn't understand at first. But every failure was a lesson, and Howard treated them that way. I remember him telling us after a particularly bad quarter, "We're not just building a company. We're building resilience. If we survive this, we'll be stronger." And damn it, he was right. The 1990s were a blur. Suddenly, Starbucks wasn't just in Seattle or Chicago, it was everywhere. New York, Los Angeles, San Francisco. We became part of people's daily routines. Folks weren't just drinking coffee anymore. They were carrying our cups like badges, symbols of a lifestyle. That white cup with the green logoette became a cultural statement. And then came the big leap: international expansion. I'll admit, when Howard first talked about opening stores overseas, I thought he'd finally lost it. America was one thing, but Japan, the UK, China, that sounded like madness. But once again, I underestimated him. I flew out to Tokyo for the opening of the first Starbucks in Japan. I'll never forget standing there, halfway across the world, watching a crowd of locals walk in with that same curiosity I'd seen back in Chicago. And just like before, they sat down, took a sip, and something clicked. The place filled up with conversation, laughter, connection. Different country, different culture, same magic. That was the moment I realized Starbucks wasn't just an American dream. It was universal. But with growth came criticism too. People said we were becoming too big, too corporate, crushing local coffee shops. Some accused us of selling overpriced coffee. And maybe, in some ways, they were right. But here's the thing. Starbucks wasn't selling coffee. Starbucks was selling an experience. A sense of belonging in a fast, disconnected world. That's what people were paying for. Whether they realized it or not. I'll be honest with you. There were years I thought we might collapse under our own weight. The early 2000s were especially tough. We expanded so aggressively that sometimes we lost focus. Stores started opening too close together. The magic got diluted. The recession hit, and suddenly, people weren't as eager to pay for dollars for a latte. Sales dipped. Analysts predicted our fall. I remember one board meeting where the tension was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Some wanted to pull back, retreat, maybe even sell. But Howard, God bless him, stood up and said, "Starbucks has always been about more than profit. We will not lose our soul. We'll fix this, and we'll come back stronger." And we did. We closed underperforming stores, refocused on quality, retrained baristas, doubled down on values. Slowly, but surely, the tide turned. Customers came back. The logo didn't just survive the recession, it came out shining brighter by the time I retired. Starbucks was no longer just a coffee chain. It was a part of global culture. More than 30,000 stores worldwide. A company worth billions, and all built on an idea that almost failed in the very beginning. Now, sitting here at 65, I tell this story not to brag, but to remind you and anyone listening that success isn't about never falling. It's about getting back up every damn time you do. Starbucks almost failed. I almost walked away. Howard almost couldn't raise the money, but almost doesn't mean failure. Almost means you're still in the fight. So if you're sitting there with a dream that people laugh at, a business idea everyone says is crazy, remember this. Once upon a time, Starbucks was just a tiny shop selling beans in Seattle. Nobody believed in it. Nobody thought it would work. And today, it's a household name in every corner of the world. Dreams look impossible until they're done. That's the truth. And if a little coffee shop that almost failed could change the world, maybe just maybe your dream can too.